This video is made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Hello everyone, my name is Ziamaro and welcome to Battle Sage. Just quickly before I start, it's Wednesday, so after the video head over to twitch.tv/BattleRightSage. So, I imagine by now most of you have watched the regional finals of BPL, and if you haven't, I would definitely recommend watching it. In particular, go and watch the match between Dolos and Gatekeepers. Like, genuinely, that was one of the closest and most intense games I've seen in Battle Right so far. And for those of you who did watch BPL this weekend, you may have noticed something. The Rook meta. And apologies for the ropey Rook footage. I can honestly count the number of times I've played Rook on my fingers, so yeah, just deal with that. Anyway, it's not a totally new phenomenon, but nearly every game in BPL this weekend had a Rook. Rook has actually been pretty strong for a while now, but for some reason it took a while for NA and EU to fully abuse it. Interestingly enough though, South America have been making good use of Rook for a while now, so they were a little ahead of the curve on that one. There are a number of reasons why Rook is so dominant right now, but ultimately it all boils down to burst damage and self-sustain. At the highest level, burst damage is king in Battle Right. You're always looking to do unhealable damage. As I'm sure all of you know by now, as soon as you do more than 40 damage, that health isn't coming back from a healer, you have to get it back from orbs. And Rook has burst combos for days. Like, alone he can already deal more than that magic 40 HP number, and because of the added CC, with assistance from his team you can do way more than that. On top of that, Rook has great self-healing, which allows for some very aggressive support play as well. Rook is actually so dominant right now that most team comps have been built around him. And it's actually quite interesting because it's brought to light other champions whose strengths may have been somewhat overlooked before. For example, Iva has become a very popular pick in the Rook meta for a number of reasons. First off, her flamethrower can completely bypass Rook's counter, allowing her to do some pretty meaty damage without triggering counters. But then loads of champions can do something like that, so that's not the main reason. Another reason is her ability to cleanse. Iva's shield actually removes debuffs from her allies, making those Rook stuns and incaps far less scary. And finally, and this is the main reason why Iva's being played so much right now, her taser. With the Conductor and EMP battle rights, she can purge buffs from 2 enemies. And it now cleanses any nearby allies too, thanks to a recent buff. And why is this so powerful? Well, Rook relies a lot on buffs and debuffs, so Iva can very effectively shut down a Rook. Hell, even hitting his counter isn't so punishing when you have an Iva. Just hit the damn thing and then taser him to remove Berserk. For the record, I'm definitely not recommending this as a tactic, but the fact that you do have that as an option with Iva is pretty insane. And as I mentioned, the ability to cleanse debuffs also hurts an enemy Rook. Being able to remove those stuns, incaps, and even armor break is really strong. And the addition of an extra cleanse on taser is just the icing on the cake. Imagine this scenario. 2 Rooks charge into each other. They both get Berserk and they both get armor break on each other. But one Rook has an Iva on their team and the other doesn't. The Iva just tasers the enemy Rook and it removes Berserk on the enemy and it removes armor break on their ally. Needless to say, that alone is going to totally turn the tide. For just one cooldown, that's a lot of utility. And let's not forget the fact that it's also a spell block stun and, oh yeah, it also bounces to nearby enemies. It's actually kind of funny when you think about it, because I remember Iva being seen as a bit of a dud in the preseason. Her numbers and utility have actually been slowly creeping up for months, but it's taken until now for people to really see how strong she is. Her damage is still kinda meh compared to like Jamong or Ashka for example, but her team utility is absolutely unparalleled. So much so that she almost seems like a support at times. Which brings me to the third feature of the Rook meta, Oldur. This guy I'm actually quite happy to see in the meta. With Rook's self-sustain and Iva's insane kit, you don't really need a support with tons of utility and healing. So why not take Oldur? He offers more than enough utility by himself, but with Rook and Iva by his side, all of his weaknesses are pretty much covered. Oldur brings a lot of damage to the table for a support. In fact, in a lot of cases, he can do more damage than an Iva if you're running that comp. On top of that, he can be quite effective at shutting down ranged champions with his EXQ. I mean, when you really break down the relationship between those 3 champions, you can see why it works so well. An Oldur comp brings a lot of offensive pressure, but it does lack some utility, which Iva can provide. And the other trade-off is much lower healing output compared to some other supports. And again, that's covered by Rook's self-sustain. And actually between the 3, you've got so many stuns. Like if you can get someone in an Oldur ult and then you stun them with the Iva E and then you stun them with the Rook space and then with the Rook mouse 2. Like that's a lot of stuns. You might even call it a Stunlock. Having a very solid meta comp is definitely not ideal, but I have to say this is one of the more fun comps to watch. It's certainly more fun to watch than the constant poke and disengages when everyone was playing Thorn, Destiny and Paloma. But needless to say, it's very likely that both Rook and Iva will be looked at some point. There's no official confirmation on this, but I'm sure a lot of you have heard through the grapevine that there could be some balance tweaks coming before the LAN finals in June. This is just a rumour, so take it with a grain of salt. But if we do get nerfed soon, it'll be interesting to see what kind of comps people run for the international finals at Dreamhack. As annoying as Rook can be in solo queue right now, I've actually really enjoyed watching him in BPL. If he does get nerfs, I just hope that he remains a viable choice for Dreamhack. It's going to be a great platform for Battlerite, and while it looks bad to have everyone playing the same comp, for someone who's never seen Battlerite before, the Rook meta is actually pretty exciting to watch. And speaking of Dreamhack, who do you think's going to take first place? SSG were looking very solid on Saturday, and I think South America's Rampage and Red Canids may surprise people. But if I was a betting man, my money would still be on Impact for the win. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more Battlerite guides, news and discussion. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some unique rewards, then head over to patreon.com/battleritesage. And don't forget to check out twitch.tv/battleritesage. Until next time, thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.